brother. He's born November 16th, so his birthday is next week. So give him a round of applause. And Earth Strong, Soul Return is going to be next week. Smooth brother to me. Smoothest voice, like Lloyd Strayhorn, who was born February 16th. They got some smooth voices. These brothers handle a radio and handle a microphone very well. So I'm honored to have this brother who's been in the Board of Ed, been like the spook that sat by the door in the Board of Ed for over 30 years now. And not retired, like he said. He has reinvented himself. No retiring in this business. We got things to do. So I'm honored to have him here. And I want y'all to all stand up for this elder man. He's been under Dr. Clark, Van, Barashako, everybody. And give a love to this brother here, Brother Cowboy. Hiawatha, comedian, a.k.a. Booker T. Coleman Jr. Give a round of applause. Come on, put your hands together. Yeah! My brother, Hotep. You need a share, brother?
I will sit back.
Okay, I'll bring in that saucy.
It's good to see you. I appreciate it. Hotep. Do I need a mic?
If you want yeah, just stand it up right here.
I may need it eventually.
No, we got a mic.
Hotep family. Hey, brother, what's going on? Oh, man. Family's here now. Hotep, everybody. I thank my brother, King Simon, for inviting me. I thank all of you for coming out, spending this time. The many things that I've learned, time is the most precious thing we have. It really is. If you have a person of age with all the money in the world and everybody around, if you ask him or her what it is that they would like a little bit more of, they will always tell you time. They don't care about no more money. They don't care about anything else. It's just a little bit more time. So time is the most precious thing we have. And so for you to spend this time here, I really do appreciate you doing this. I really, honestly appreciate. I appreciate our young people being here, and I appreciate Nicholas's family. I've been coming to Nicholas for a large period of time, a very long time. And when the Board of Ed had me doing programs, a great deal of my finances went to Nicholas, from the flags to the drapes to everything. I ensured that I spent money in our community. And these are the conscious things that we really have to start to do, is to actively spend money in our community. And one of the things that I encourage, in fact, I was here a little bit over a month ago purchasing, and I was in Nicholas up in Harlem also. And I remember when they were, I think, 16th Street near Broadway in that area there. Yeah, I mean, that's where I was going. And I remember when it was Nubian Heritage and it was Nicholas, and now I know Nicholas, but we have to make a very serious change. And we have it within our power to do it. And that's another very important thing for us to understand. Because the way things have been dropped on us in so many different ways, we think that there's a lot that we have to do. It's almost like it's overwhelming sometimes when we think what we have to do. But you know something? It is not overwhelming. It is not at all. It is a mindset that decides that there are certain things we're going to do. And one thing that we can start to do right off the bat is we can put aside a certain amount of our money every week and decide that we are going to spend it with one of the vendors somewhere, whether it be Nicholas, whether it be a brother or a sister on Fulton Avenue as you go down towards Nostrand, or 125th Street, or somewhere in Queens, or 161st Street in the Bronx where the brothers are outside that mini mall. We can actually start to put aside money and spend 5% of our salary with the vendors. That's what we can do right off the bat. And now that don't take much to do. We can begin to decide that the kinds of gifts that as you look around here, there are gifts that we can give during the holiday season. Instead of going to one of the other stores, we come here to get the gifts. We can start to think on that level. That can be done. So that's one thing, spending money with our people wherever we may find them. The other thing that I encourage us to do is when we pass the young brothers, sisters in the street, speak to them. Or it is un-African not to do that. It is un-African to be on an elevator and not greet a brother or a sister. Or greet another human being, period. But particularly us. And that's something we can start to do the moment we leave this place right here. Just that alone. And I realize I'm not speaking about putting ourselves in harm's way, because I do realize sometimes kindness can be misconstrued for weakness. And I understand that also. And I don't want to go there in the sense that I'm just saying let's all go out there and just be bubbly. You know what I'm saying? I am saying that we should consciously begin to embrace our brothers and sisters where we find them. It is un-African, it is un-Native American-like not to greet each other. And you will find that even on the hardest hard face of a brother or a sister, a kind word or just a greeting can make that face slide off their face, crash to the ground, and one of the handsomest and most beautiful smiles will take its place. These are the kinds of things that we have to start to do. We have to start to look at our sister, Sister Ma'a, who meets every third Saturday of the month over on Taffy, or to reach out to Dr. Sabi, or to reach out to Dr. Africa, and we have to begin to look at our health. Because with all this wonderful information we may be getting in, it does no good in a sick body. So that's another aspect. This is a holistic approach that we have to start to look at. And I realize there are some things that I get into sometimes that's not on Dr. Sabi's and Sister Ma'a's list. I know that. But then so often, I just get a taste for it, I'll go ahead and do it. But the idea of fasting is something that we need to start thinking about doing on a consistent and a constant level. These are the real things that we can start to do. It's not overwhelming. The other thing is to look at our brother and to continue to listen to our brother, although he is an ancestor now, Gil Scott Heron. Yes. And understand what he meant when he said that the revolution wouldn't be televised. When he explained to us that what you see happening on the streets is not the revolution. That's the result of the revolution. Because a real revolution happens in the mind. And that can't be televised. And that's why the revolution will not be televised. We have to understand that there was a great Puerto Rican, Boricua, okay, Don Pedro Albizu Campos, who said, when tyranny is law, revolution is order. And we have to understand what he meant by that. When tyranny is law, revolution is order. And that demands in the mind. I'm not speaking about physical right now, because that comes at a time when everybody's on the same page. I'm not asking for anybody to be a martyr out there. I'm not a martyr. You know, there was this guy asked me, he said one time, he was not of our background or mindset. He asked me if I was willing to give up my life for what I believed in. I said, no, I'm not willing to give up my life, but I certainly am willing to take yours. Now that shut the conversation down right there. Because you see, I'm tired of this martyrdom thing. I love life, I enjoy it. Dr. King was right, longevity has its place. Yes. I love life. And what we're doing for our children is that we're overburdening them, we're overwhelming them with a life that is unattractive. And they're wondering if all of this is what we get at the end, is it worth it to do it in the first place? So we first have to show them there's something willing and we should be willing to fight for. And that is life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. See, they got that from us.
What did they get?
Nothing. The only thing I believe that the Western world, the Western mind, because as I look around, there's a whole lot of folk that look like us that got the same kind of mind. So I'm going beyond the color or complexion or a race of people right now, because see, when the vampire bites, although you may have avoided Dracula throughout the entire movie, once he bites you, you become the undead. You start acting like the vampire. And in so many different ways, we all are somewhat, Well, let me just take me so I don't start pointing fingers. Let me just take me. Because I have to think about paying the rent. I have to think about putting food on the table. I'm not back in a homeland that would supply it automatically. I'm not in a homeland where my children will automatically be looked out for, understanding that everybody in the community understood it took the community to raise the children. We're not there. And that's a reality that I think that we have to face. And a lot of the times that we're struggling against the realities of what we face, against the trueness of the culture from whence we come.
Strange and strange.
And it becomes a problem, my brother Dawud. It becomes a very serious problem because the decisions you make may go against everything you may believe in, but it is what you have to do to survive.
We call it pragmatism. Being pragmatic.
Pragmatism. It's something that we have to look at. We have to be serious about this as we go through this, and we have to teach our children these kinds of things to help them understand that there is a way of living, but there's also never give up what is truest within you, and hope that one day you can get back there. But if by chance you don't, be a moving target, not a sitting duck.
That's right.
You know, I mean, these are just the concepts that we have to teach our young people, particularly our young men, who, in a very interesting way, we have to examine what has happened to us as a people and who we are as a people, and in general come to certain decisions for ourselves, by ourselves. And there is so much history that's either not been told or is just absolutely untrue. They have us now fighting our Cherokee brothers and sisters.
Divide and conquer.
And and my daddy got Cherokee from Alabama and Choctaw. And so I'm aware of the indigenous population. I'm understanding who they are as a people. I'm understanding indigenous people in general as I study and learn more. And one of the things that we have to do is we have to bury everything that we've ever been taught. Because that's just untrue. And another thing that might be a little bit challenging for us to all to digest is that there is a certain group of them that know the truth. And they tell untruths. Yeah. But there's a larger group that are just plain straight up ignorant. And we have to understand that many of the things that they do to us do not come from premeditation. It just comes from total incompetence. The Western world is probably one of the most ignorant groups of nations that I have ever experienced in my life when you study ancient history. No civilization with any thought of living for the future would do the things that this civilization has done. From the moment it was born, it began to commit suicide. And right now what we're experiencing here is a group of them who are hoping to be able to reach back into their African ancestry and save their people. I'm talking about occupied Wall Street. They are a group of European people, and yes, we dot in there somewhere. But remember Malcolm. See that Occupy Wall Street? Reminds me of Malcolm, when Malcolm said, "Boss, we sick. Boss, our house on fire." Our house not on fire. Their house on fire.
Well, you mean weak, people, Saudi?
Yeah, it had nothing to do with weak. It ain't weak. See, what they did was very ingenious the day before yesterday. Because like all things, they realized they had to go get the Nubians to survive. And so what they did is they went up into Washington Heights.
Yes.
And started their march down to Zuccotti Park, hoping to get the black folk. Because they understood the only way forward is with the Nubians.
Yes.
The only way forward to understand the creativity of revolution. The only way to think through revolution is to have the origin archetype of humanity with you. And there weren't enough of us there. So they went up to Washington Heights.
Try to see if they can get some stragglers.
And bring them down. They walked down to Zuccotti Park. 30-something miles they walked. Now there are a lot of folks that, oh, isn't that nice? They wanted to include people. No, they needed us. See, we don't understand. They would not have done that had they not needed us. Because it took them about a month to figure out they needed us. So they didn't have us in mind when they first started. We got to realize this. And this Occupy Wall Street is the most interesting thing. And see, this is why history is so important to understand, because when you understand history and when you understand feudalism, and when you understand what happened in Europe during the feudal period, when we understand what happened when a group of Africans who had depigmented themselves, calcified their pineal gland, returned to the southern lands about 2000 BC, and they came upon these peoples with civilizations in what is called Elam. Today we call it Iran. When they went to Sumer, we today call it Iraq. When they went into between the Tigris and Euphrates River, in a land, a nation that we call Mesopotamia, they came upon a civilization that they knew not. And they blended with these peoples, and they continued to move west until they were in a land that's called Canaan. Today we call it Israel. Day before yesterday we call it Palestine. But the day before Palestine it was Canaan. And as an African people, we must also be careful whose sides we take in this war. Because remember, the Palestinians are the descendants of the Philistines, and the Philistines are the ones that murdered the African Canaanites. So before we decide to start taking sides, let's understand history, and maybe we need to mind our own business and take care of our house, and let those forces that first came upon us to attempt to destroy us, because remember, Dr. Clark teaches us, long before the European came, it was the Eurasian that came into East Africa to attempt to enslave African peoples and weaken Africa, and adapted a faith system that had already been practiced in Ethiopia, and that is where Islam comes from. Let's be serious about it if we're going to talk. See, because I'm at the age right now where I don't care what people think about me. When I was a little younger, I cared. The wonderful thing about very young people, brother has talked about kindergarten children. One of the wonderful things about kindergarten children, if you ever want to find out about yourself, just hang around 5-year-olds for a while. Or hang around 85-year-olds for a while. Because when you're at those extremes, you're not attempting to survive, so you're not going to lie to people to survive. When you're old, you don't care. You're set. You're gone. Okay, that's it. When you're young, you're too pure. And I've been around 5-year-olds a long time, and they taught me a lot about myself. About my real self. Not about who I portray to be. Not who I attempt to show on the outside, but who I am really. And that's one of the greatest gifts I think I've had in my development in the Board of Ed, is to be around children. Because there's something about a child's mind that's so pure that if you're one with Ma'at, they will keep you pure. And what we're observing out here is our young people demanding the truth. And we're not telling them the truth. And what has kept me challenged in the work that I have done is my attempt to always let the young people know the truth. Whether it's in Rikers Island, whether it is in the Harlem Valley Secure Center up in Wingate, New York, where they get our children who are too young to go to the adult facilities. So they create them for the young people. They stopped me. They were bringing me to Rikers. And I used to always go with the Constitution. And I was dropping some information as it relates to the 13th Amendment to the young people. And I was trying to explain to them that the enslavement of African people never was abolished. It was sidestepped in the prison, and the evidence of it is the words of the 13th Amendment. And our young people began to realize that, and they began to spend more time in the library. They began to spend more time reading the books. I started donating the books. Some of the books I got from here in Nicholas. I would send to different places of incarceration of our people. And they began to read these books. Stolen Legacy, Introduction to Africa, John G. Jackson. You know, and then I would go back and visit and answer their questions. Our community is hurt. They're not hard, they're hurt. And it's been systematic like that, one letdown after another. And we have to begin to explain to our young people who they are. We must stop fighting amongst ourselves. Dr. Clark said the only difference between a Puerto Rican, a Dominicano, Jamaican, Haitian, African American from Chicago or Los Angeles is a boat style. We have to stop this mindless dialogue. By matter of degree, our hair texture, the complexion of our skin, the width of our nose, our lips, whatever it is, may be by matter of degree different, but we're black. Let's get over that. Okay, let's just get over it. Let's have a big cry, build a bridge, and get over it. Because the denigration of Africa has caused people to reject their Africanness because they don't know who they are. And everything that has made these individuals great comes from Africa. Europeans, Spaniards had no culture. In fact, the Spanish language as a language didn't exist up until somewhere near 1400 ACE. The Spanish language did not exist. That was brought upon by groups of people who translated the works of Africans from Arabic, or I call it Afrabic, because to be an Arab, you must be African. That's what makes you an Arab. You black. They took the works that was written in Arabic, the science, the technology, the agriculture. Smart king Alphonse X in Spain translated the works of the Africans into Latin. And that Latin is what brought forward what we call the Spanish language. It's a derivative of French, it's a derivative of Italian, it's a derivative of Romanian.
They call it the Romance language.
The Romance language coming from Roman. And if in the fight Remus had beat Roman, it would be called the Remance languages. Because the only reason why it's called Rome is because Romulus beat Remus. It was interesting. A guy told me when I was talking about the origins of life coming from Africa, he said, so I guess your relatives are gorillas. And I said, yes, they are gorillas. They're not my relatives, but they're distant relations. But I said, you, sir, this was a person of European descent, you are a son of a bitch. And he said, he took it back, but I said, look, I'm not trying to be funny. Go back and what is your story? Your story is about Romulus and Remus suckling at a female wolf's breast.
3 Dog Night.
Okay? 3 Dog Night.
3 Dog Night. They had a group, named a group about it.
Yeah. And they even had a song. So, the last time I checked, a female dog. So, you must be a son of a. And this is their history. We have to begin to look at our history and understand who we are as a people. And I've come because to talk about OLMECS civilization. And there are just things. Brother Tyrone is a brother. Tyrone, who's a good brother. He's part of our school, per honor. And he texted me and showed me pictures. This brother in the Bronx went to Crotona Park and did a tour of the mounds in Crotona Park, Bronx. I went to Toronto, and a brother shared a book with me. It's entitled Pyramids in America. Almost every state
Yes, sir.
has mounds, okay? What's interesting about mounds and pyramids is their purpose. And there is numbers of things that we should look at when we're trying to develop an understanding of what these mounds represent. The mounds are astronomical lines of sight. For instance, I brought some material with me because, as you know, part of what I do is always in an attempt to keep us learning. 2-hour presentations never do what they're supposed to do. In fact, I believe they should just be kickoffs. And I've always been one for bringing materials that will allow you to continue this study of what we're talking about. But to be very serious, because you know, brothers and sisters, and with our children, I understand the visualness of African people. I do understand oral history. I do understand that. I respect that. It's ubiquitous to African thought. But we have to start to read. We have to start to read. We have to start building up our libraries. We have to make it that Brother Nicholas and his families understand that all these books are going to be bought by everybody in this room sometime, somewhere. I'm all for DVDs, and I understand, but we have to start to read. Because reading is another form of engagement. Reading, we invented reading. We invented writing. And we have to start to read seriously. And if we don't know how to read, then we need to start to develop programs that will teach our community how to read. I don't care how old you are. We need to start to read. We need to start to have tutorial programs where we're teaching our people how to read. Because, you know, one of the great problems that we have, and the reason why I don't leave out any of the other areas that are important, is that when you study the African way of learning, you understand what reading is. See, reading is all about decoding. There's no such thing as you can't read. Reading is decoding. Reading right now, when you're looking at me, you're reading. You're reading me. And I'm reading you. And out of this, I'm learning something about you as it relates to what I'm saying to you. And as a facilitator or as a teacher, that strategy is very important. Because I have to be able to understand certain things about your body language to me that's allowing me to understand whether or not you are understanding and learning what I'm saying. And I must adjust my way I'm acting according to what you're telling me by your body language. And that's why Dr. Clark was a master teacher. You know, one day I was with Dr. Clark. This was years ago. I was a young brother. And I had gone with him. I forget where it was, but he was doing a presentation, and I accompanied him where the presentation was. And at the end of the presentation, he said to me, "Booker T, I noticed this evening you didn't hear a word I said." Because that night I didn't listen to anything he said because I wanted to watch how he said it. See, a teacher not only speaks a lot of information, because I know a lot of teachers very intelligent, they speak a lot of interesting information, but when it comes to the transmission of the thoughts that he or she may be trying to give you, they're failing. Because you can end up listening to somebody for 2 hours that's dropped some heavy stuff on you. You say, "Well, what did he say?" Because the ability to transmit it was not effective. And Dr. Clark was effective when that brother used to talk. James Smalls, another brilliant scholar. And I always use James Smalls' example of Dr. Clark when he was teaching a class on Shaka Zulu. And he said that when Dr. Clark would talk about Shaka, in this particular case, it's as if Shaka was in the room telling his story. A master storyteller. He was able to transmit the story so effectively, so much like a jailer, what the French call griot. So effective that you literally thought by the use of his words and his metaphors and the way he spoke, you could think, you could almost see Shaka Zulu in the room. And the most effective and efficient teachers can do that. And that becomes extremely important. But at the same time, as that is happening, you're decoding things that I'm saying right now. You're decoding. When you're reading, you're decoding symbols. Let me give you an example. I don't speak German. There are other languages I speak that I could read, that I could understand. But if I went to Germany and took a first grade test in African history in German, I would not pass the test. Is it because I don't know African history? No, I don't know how to decode German. You see? That's what reading is. It's decoding. Same letters. German uses the same alphabet. They're all based on the Greek alphabet. Greek, of course, there's no Greek alphabet. That's an African alphabet, but that's a whole other discussion we're going to have down the road. But the idea is that it's the same alphabet, the same letters, but the way in which it's rearranged, I've got to code it a certain way. If I don't understand it, if I don't understand the code of German, I am not going to be successful in being able to interpret what I'm being asked, even on a first grade level. Our children are not suffering from being illiterate. Our children are not culturally deprived. Our children are deprived of their culture. And there's a difference. There's a difference. Reading is very straightforward. Most knowledge and wisdom, very straightforward. And this is what Tehuti was telling Heru when he was explaining to him, if you could solve this problem, you will not only get outsight, you will not only get your sight back, but you will get insight. And he said that everything you need to know is right in front of you. So therefore, what Tehuti was telling Heru, the resurrected son, the creator force, was nothing is hidden. Nothing, no information. They call it the mystery system. There's no mystery. The mystery is in your mind. Science says, know thyself. So if you don't know yourself, then you're not going to understand yourself, which means that if you can't understand yourself, you can't understand anything else going down. The first step in reading is listening. This is why the oral tradition is so important in Africa. Listening. Where the elder community talks to the child. And what is happening in the human mind is that you're building up a mental library. The words are there. You might ask them, repeat what I said. Okay, you're telling them a story. Mufaro's beautiful daughter. What kind of daughter was she? Beautiful. Who was the daughter? Who was the father? Mufaro. Because what you're doing now is you're giving them comprehension also. These are not just Mufaro's beautiful daughter, because really when you stop and think about it, of what importance, those are just three words. Mufaro, beautiful, daughter. Means nothing. You got to know what a daughter is. You got to know what beautiful is. And you got to know what Mufaro is. So as you're reading these stories through the oral tradition, see, we speak of the oral tradition, but sometimes we don't apply it in our everyday reading. Listening is the first step into reading. Long before you start reading, listening is what you're doing. You're listening, you're building a mental vocabulary, words are coming into your head. You then ask them to repeat the words. The next step in reading is speaking. So from listening, you go to speaking. How can you speak if you don't listen? So from listening, you go to speaking. After speaking, you then show them Mufaro's beautiful daughter. You then show them what an M looks like, what a U looks like, what an F looks like. That is the decoding of your words that are placed in their mind. But you first got to put Mufaro's beautiful daughter in their brain. Then you have it come out of their lips. Then you show them the code as we would speak English. If we were in another country, it would be a different situation, but every culture has its own language, or so to speak. So what we're doing now, we're dealing with English right now. And that's another thing. As sorry as I am to tell you this, the only way to master another language is to master the language that you're thinking. You got to master English, whether we like it or not. Because how can you know another word like in Kiswahili? Bwana means mister. Mwalimu means teacher. But what good is mwalimu if you don't know teacher? You see? So they got us locked. The vampire got us locked now. But hey, let's give it up. Let's realize it. We're going to master English. If we speak Spanish, got to master Spanish. Okay? To attempt to teach a Puerto Rican Kemetic history in English who thinks in Spanish is ineffective. They gotta be able to interpret it through the language that they think in. That's why I always ask the children in my class, what language are you thinking? They say, well, I think in both. I say, well, when you get real excited, or you get upset, or you get angry, what do you think? I think in Spanish. That's the language that you think in. Because your thought language comes through your emotions. Your emotions is what you have to go by when you're thinking about what language that you're thinking. The next step, first step is listening. Next step is speaking. Now you're reading. Now you're decoding. Then the fourth step in reading, writing. Right? Because in reading is comprehension. Writing is the next step. To be a good reader, you must be a good, as you were. To be a good writer, you must be a good reader. To be a good reader, you must be a good speaker. And I'm not necessarily saying speaking vocally, because some people are a little shy, maybe interpersonal, but there are people that you speak to. You don't live your life not talking at all. To be a good listener, to be a good speaker, you must be a good listener. That's the steps in reading. Very simple, isn't it? All we got to do now for our children who are having challenges in reading, think about what I just told you. Here's an example. A child has a problem, as they say, can't read. Okay? You have a child's book. Cover the caption, cover the speaking, and say to the child, what do you see? The child will say, well, I see a boy that's chasing a dog that's chasing a ball. What color is the ball? It's red. If you move your hand back and read the caption, it probably says the boy is chasing the dog that's chasing a red ball. Now the question is, did that child read? Yeah, but the child read visually. Decoded visually. That's why I say we are always decoding through our senses, through things that we touch. Another great activity to do with children is to have like a bag, and you put things inside, and you ask them, put their hand in and describe what they have in their hand without looking at it. So you have maybe like a little ball to say, yeah, I feel a ball. What does it feel like? It feels like sponge. It's probably like a sponge ball. Or it might be a rubber ball. Okay? Because what you're doing now is you're asking the child to be able to seek reality without being able to see. And so now you're taking them to another higher level of thinking. See, these are things we can do with our children. This is real. And I only wish that when I was a younger child, I understood the African tradition of teaching, because Africans have a very wonderful way of teaching. These so-called primitive people are some of the most brilliant people, because they keep it simple. My writing, very simple. I write on a 6th grade level. I don't plan on sending it to Columbia or to Yale for their approval. I don't care about their validation. I want our community to be able to, I keep it very simple. I write simple sentences. Don't write those compound sentences with comments. I can, but I choose not to, because it's easier for me to be able to just write simple sentences. Subject, verb, adjective, adverb, noun. Keep it like that. Not trying to impress people with my manner of writing. I'm trying to get a point across to folk. Also, I attempt to take a lot of work and condense it down. That's why when you see some of the work I have, it may be 24 pages. I could have stretched out my study guide to be 100 and something pages. But I want to simplify. The one thing that made Malcolm a genius was he took the complex and made it simple. Malcolm could say something to somebody that was a PhD and somebody that never got out to 7th grade, and they both could walk away with a clear understanding of what that brother had said. That, to me, is a genius. To take the complex and make it simple. And see, my problem is, I've noticed in my experiences with folk, that the more complex somebody tries to make something, the less they understand. Because the reason why they're making it complex is so that if you don't get it, you'll never understand they never got it either. So they're going to try to keep your eye off the fact that they're not as intelligent as you think.
Intellectual masturbation.
That's the bottom line. It feels good, but what a waste, right? And this is the world that we're living in right now. We're living in a world that deals with these concepts and these understandings. Here is a mound in Mexico. I have this in my guide. This is just a page. But what it shows you is that the pyramids and the mounds of Mexico are a line of sight for the Draconis constellation, the serpent in the sky. They didn't build pyramids just to be building pyramids, nor did they build pyramids to bury people. But there was a metaphor in that concept. And just think about this. There is a book, Blacks in Science. I'm sure you have that book there.
We normally do when we got stuff.
Okay, Blacks in Science. There's an essay, Nomura Tunga. Okay? And this is an archaeoastronomical essay of a series of people that went to Kenya and came in contact with a group of people known as the Konso people. Konso people straddle northern Kenya, southern Ethiopia, right to the east of the Omo River, very important river. See, a lot of times we're very caught up in the Nile River, but the Omo River is another very important river. It's one of the side rivers that had a great impact on the development of the first human beings, particularly civilization. And in this place, Nomura Tunga, it means stone people. Nomura Tunga in the Konso language means stone people. These archaeologists and astronomers found that these Africans had built these stone structures that were lopsided. And they said, wow, it's interesting that these would be lopsided. And what they found was that each one of these, there were 19 of them, every one of these pillars pointed to a different major star in 4 constellations. The first star that it pointed to was Sirius in the dog star, okay, Canis Major. Then it went up and it tagged ones like Bellatrix and Betelgeuse in Orion. And then it went to Taurus. And then it went to Triangulum. 4 constellations. Triangulum looks like a triangle. When you chart these stars and you join the dots, they look like a serpent in the sky. And the triangulum is the head of the serpent that's pointing in a certain direction. Now, when folks say to me, where did Africans go? When you study the work of Empress Vertice of the Washita Nation in Louisiana, and she talks about her book, please, brother.
Somebody told me, and I don't know, that they had put her in a home or something.
California.
Is that true?
I understand that to be true also, but until I hear from her,
That's why I
it's,
had
yeah, I heard the same thing in California.
I know her story, and that's
Yeah.
why I
Well, I had spoken in Atlanta one time, and she saw my DVD, and she asked the caretakers for me to call her.
Oh, okay.
And so I called her one evening, and she and I had a conversation for 3 hours. She told me she only had 10 minutes to talk to me. We ended up talking for 3 hours.
Oh, all right. She's doing the work.
She wrote a book called The Return of the Ancient Ones. Return of the Ancient Ones. Okay. Now, you have to understand, Empress Vertice, of course, is going to come back into our conversation this evening. She is the queen mother, so to speak, of the Washita Nation, which is the indigenous Moorish science temple concept. Long before Noble Drew Ali, Africans were down there in Louisiana. That in itself is a conversation that, again, when we don't understand the ancient world, when we don't understand who we are and we understand what we've actually done, where we have been. See, the Western civilization has gotten us to believe through their vampire bite that everything began and happened post 1492. We tend to believe that astro travel began with the Russians and the United States. Yet every time you look at a Tekenu or an obelisk, every one of them looks like a rocket ship.
Yes.
Look at them all. Every one of them. Even the ones that are airplanes. They get their boost up into the heavens by a rocket. An airplane that would go into space cannot take off on its own. It needs something that looks like a rocket to take it up, and then it separates. And then what looks like the airplane continues up, right? But what gets it up into the heavens is a technique. Yet we still have struggles believing that African people traveled in space. We can believe that something started with the demand of President Kennedy in the 50s and 60s, and now all of a sudden we in space. And if they could do, let's just give it a 1959 time. 1959 to let's just say 2009 basically is how many years?
50 years.
50 years. If this civilization, as shallow as it is, could do that in 50, what could African civilization do in over 5,000? We already know they understood the heavens. We already know that they understood concepts of travel. They already knew the sun. They already knew the planet. So what would make us think that it took 1959 to learn how to travel in space? So that when we're thinking about these concepts, we need to start to begin to move our young people into thinking about travel, space travel, the sun. The evidence of the pyramids and the evidence of the mounds and the evidence of Namuratunga now. Now, in Namuratunga, they found that these were burials, okay? And these people said to the indigenous council, wow, that's quite something else, wow. They said, but if you think this is something, travel 210 kilometers northwest, and you're going to see something else. So they travel over to the other site, and what do they find? They find the same 19 stones facing in the same direction, in all of the same. Not 1 degree off between Namuratunga 1 and what they call Namuratunga 2. These were not burial sites. These were lines of sight to these constellations that become the serpent in the sky. Now think of the philosophy behind burying somebody. Sacred grounds, and this is where we're going to go to the mounds, because we have to understand them. These are sacred grounds, but what makes them sacred is the relationship of as above, so below. There's an astronomical value to sacred places that they bury. Think of this. When we think of our ancestors who are deceased, we think of them going to heaven. Don't we pray that they go to heaven? Wouldn't it be interesting that if you understood that where that sacred ground was and where that stele was a line of sight, philosophically you might believe that if your ancestor's spirit were to tap into that path of the constellation, where would they head? They'd head to the heavens. So metaphorically, it's a concept that the spirit is going to heaven because you are directly on lines of sight into the constellations. So Return of the Ancient Ones, of what Empress Verdici is talking about, is the ones that left are coming back. But if you read deeper into her discussion, it's not that they left and coming back. They never left, and we are in fact our own ancestors that are living on the planet.
Truly.
Yes, sir. That's true.
So when we do libation, I know we think we're calling Booker T. Washington into the room and Madam C.J. Walker into the room and Harriet Tubman in the room. But really what we're doing is acknowledging the Harriet Tubman within us. We are our ancestors. We carry the DNA, the dynamic, natural attraction, that they are one with us. They are within us, and we are living, and we are God having a human experience.
Yes.
God is not out there. God is not in here. If you want to see God, go into the bathroom, look in the mirror, and you're looking at God. Because you are God. You are a piece of God having a human experience. And our purpose on this planet is to find a way to purify this entity. so that when we return back into the cosmos, we return back purer and more conscious. Because remember, in the beginning, God was very lonely. And God wanted to know him herself, but could not know him herself because spirit is too pure to be able to reflect on self. So it encased itself in matter, and matter is nothing but coagulated energy. Dark matter comes out of dark energy, the blackness. And so we, all of us, are crystallized forms of God. And in our selected amount of time on this planet, we are meant to purify ourselves. God not interested in your sneakers, or how many cars you have, or how big your house is. God is interested in the purification of the spirit, and what George G.M. James talks about, soul salvation. That's really what all this is about. Now, African folk like good things now. We like to dance, we like to eat, and considering what I see in Africa, we got a thing for gold and diamonds. So nothing wrong with having good stuff. The question becomes, are you possessing stuff at the expense that other people go to bed without eating or having clothes on their back? That's the question. Nothing wrong with having wealth, but you got to know what to do with it. So your accumulation of wealth, it's almost like the spirit gives you this wealth for you to be able to do something with it for other people, knowing that you are so godly that you know what to do with it. So instead of getting a second car, you may find water for a very thirsty group of people. You may take the money that you would have purchased that other house, because you can only live in one house at a time.
Thank you.
Okay, so instead of buying a second house, maybe you take that money and you develop a complex for a group of people to be able to live. Okay, that is why we are given wealth, but unfortunately sometimes we are given things that we can't handle. And that selfishness creates the relationships that we are now on the planet experiencing. And so the whole purpose behind these mounds that our ancestors developed and created was to be able to understand that there is a life that goes beyond it. These mounds were meant to physically demonstrate these constellations. The same way we talked about Namuratunga, these mounds throughout the world. And by the way, all these mounds face the same exact way. If you were to go above, so now here's the other thing that I want to speak about. The ancient Africans knew exactly where they wanted to go. We know they understood cardinal points. We know that they had latitude and longitude lines, because the Grand Gallery of Khufu's pyramid is built on the 30th parallel longitude east, 30th parallel north. The Grand Gallery is the meridian line. And it's 30-30, 30 north, 30 east. So if they were so exact in developing that Grand Gallery, which is in the middle of the pyramid, they understood and knew how the earth was divided as it relates to the latitude and longitude lines that we have today. They built their systems around 360 degrees, so we know that they understood the circle. And so all of these pyramids in relationship to the world, when our ancestors set off to build them, whether it was here in the United States or whether it was in China. You know, there are pyramids in China.
Yes.
There's pyramids and mounds throughout the world. And you see, you don't have to build the perfect pyramids of Egypt for them to be lines of sight. Because look at Namuratunga was done with stones that were sticking up out the ground. Yet they were lines of sight. You can go to a place called Nant Playa. There's a gentleman who wrote a book, Black Genesis. Okay? Robert Bauval. He also worked with Thomas Brophy. But Thomas Brophy wrote a book called The Origin Map, which talks about the great year, the 26,000 year. Okay? Okay? And in this book, they trace back and come to grips with it. These are two individuals that came to grips with the fact that, yes, Africa civilized the world. And that for thousands of years, they dropped the knowledge and the wisdom that would build all of the technology that we today still use, and in many ways, we are not doing it as good as they did. The fact that that building fell down in Brooklyn, what was it, yesterday?
Yes.
tells you that they're doing something wrong in their engineering.
Oh, yeah.
Because you can't build a building everywhere,
Because it's energy vortexes.
all over the planet. And our ancestors understood this. And by matter of degree, some were sacred, some were secular. But they understood the difference. You don't get secular when it's sacred, you don't get sacred when it's secular. They understood this. Our ancestors understood this. Some people might want to get into the religion of it. I don't get into the religion of it because religions are the children of spirituality. There's only one spiritual concept. There's only one. That's why it's called universe. One word. There's only one word. Bob Marley said, won't you help to sing this redemption song, the resurrection song, the Asarian song? See, Bob Marley, this is his last song on his last album. The brother was dropping some knowledge, right? Emancipate yourselves from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our mind. Have no fear for atomic energy because none of them can stop the time. See, I think that we give peoples of European descent too much credit. They're not that intelligent.
They brainwashed us.
Yes, I mean, the only power they have is the power over our mind. The only thing keeping them in power is us.
Fair.
Because you believe in an illusion. It's like a big bad wolf.
Yeah.
And if you believe in the big bad wolf, it doesn't care what type of house that you live in, you're going to be vulnerable for him to dominate.
Fair.
I look at them as children. I talk
Dangerous
to them as-
children.
Yes, and I talk to them as children.
Yeah.
Yes.
And sometimes they're not ready for a lot of the things that we would like to say.
Thank you.
And there are times that we need not speak. Because there are those that know the truth, or think they know the truth, or have a sense of the truth. But when they hear us, then they know not only the truth, but they know that we know it, and that becomes very dangerous. That's in the Matrix. Sister Sophia Stewart.
Know that you know.
Yeah.
Say again.
They can look at you and know that you know.
Yeah.
And they can look at this one and say, well, he's dead. Is it that one?
Yeah. In the Matrix, remember in the scene where there's a group that knows, and then in the middle there's a whole group of people that are just existing, and then there's the ones that know that they don't know, but know that you know. That's what Sophia Stewart was talking about. By the way, as you probably already know, Sophia Stewart's name of her book was called The Third Eye.
They stole.
And so that and the Terminator, which is also very interesting. But when you look at ancient America, in 1984, Dr. Van Sertima brought 40 people to Mexico, and I was one of them. And we studied the African presence in America, 1984, July of 1984.
That's they same up my father cast.
Is that right? Okay. 1984. Because it was a year after I'd gone to Egypt, to Kemet. I went the first time with Dr. Ben in 83. And it was a blessing because Kemet was very fresh still in my mind when I went to Mexico in 84. And Dr. Van Sertima would have a lecture at night and we would visit. And Dr. Van Sertima did for us in Mexico what Dr. Ben did for us in Egypt. He cut short a lot of the errors that he made thinking something was there. So he took us directly where we needed to go. We saw not one stone head, not two stone heads. We saw 8 stone heads. And there was one stone head that people were kidding me about because it had a space in its teeth. He said that doesn't look like you. And so those are the stone heads we saw. So when people say they had very dull tools and that's why the nose was broad and the lips were big, well, it took, what kind of tool would put a space in between the two and make the face smile? Because you couldn't see the space if it didn't smile. He took us to Teotihuacan, right outside Ciudad de Mexico City, right? Ciudad de Mexico. Mexico City, right outside Teotihuacan. Pyramid of the Sun, Pyramid of the Moon. He took us to Palenque, to the Temple of the Inscription, where there is evidence of a Tomohuancan, which was their pharaoh. Tomohuancan buried in this sarcophagus. It was a pyramid with a temple built on top and an obelisk on either side. So they took 3 architectural designs of ancient Kemet and brought it into this temple at Palenque. He took us to La Venta Park, where the OLMECS were. And having just come from Kemet the year before, still come down from the trip. I was still in awe what I saw in Kemet. I was just never. Dr. Ben, I remember he had us at the church on 145th Street, Mount Zion, where he had where First World first had their lectures on Convent Avenue, yeah, and 145th, right on the corner, up the hill. And we went into the church, and it was like 2 weeks before the trip to Kemet. I'm just excited, you know. I mean, I'm like a child, right? And I'm sitting there, and Dr. Ben gives out this book on ancient Egypt. Everybody gets a book about technology and pictures and things like that. And Dr. Ben says, I just want you all to know something before we go. I don't want you to blame me for the person that's going to come back. Because the person that's sitting in this church right now is not the person that's going to come back. And he couldn't have been more true. Because even if I wanted to, I could not change the person I became once I had that experience in Kemet. Particularly with the Dean of Teotihuacan, Pyramid of the Sun, Pyramid of the Moon. He took us to Palenque, to the Temple of the Inscription, where there is evidence of a Tomoancan, which was their pharaoh. Tomoancan buried in this sarcophagus. It was a pyramid with a temple built on top and an obelisk on either side. So they took 3 architectural designs of ancient Kemet and brought it into this temple at Palenque. He took us to La Venta Park, where the OLMECS were. And having just come from Kemet the year before, still didn't come down from the trip. I was still in awe what I saw in Kemet. I was just never. Dr. Ben, I remember he had us at the church on 145th Street, Mount Zion, where he had where First World first had their lectures on Convent Avenue, yeah, and 145th, right on the corner, up the hill. And we went into the church, and it was like 2 weeks before the trip to Kemet. I'm just excited, you know. I mean, I'm like a child, right? And I'm sitting there, and Dr. Ben gives out this book on ancient Egypt. Everybody gets a book about technology and pictures and things like that. And Dr. Ben says, I just want you all to know something before we go. I don't want you to blame me for the person that's going to come back. Because the person that's sitting in this church right now is not the person that's going to come back. And he couldn't have been more true. Because even if I wanted to, I could not change the person I became once I had that experience in Kemet. Particularly with the Dean of Kemetology, Dr. Ben. That was an experience that I just remembered so clearly, that I came back and I said, wow, I want to teach the children what I experienced. And I was a kindergarten teacher at the time in the Bronx. I was just excited. Yeah. And I was teaching my class about ancient Kemet. Okay, about Egypt. I was excited. I was too excited. Because a child raised a hand, young sister. She said, next time we go on a class trip, can we go to ancient Egypt? I spoke in such excitement and such passion. See, to a child's mind, they didn't know that ancient meant long ago and Egypt is far away. I was so excited, I made them excited, and they wanted, on the next class trip, they wanted to go to ancient Egypt. I learned a lot about the way children think like that. Because I began to realize, oh, I have to slow my roll. Because I'm bringing a passion and an excitement, but my words are not clearing really what the children need to understand. And so I learned a lot about that. But that's what happened with that trip. I was so excited when I came back that I had, because I don't want to mess it up for anyone that might go in the future, so I'm not going to say too much. But there are experiences that you have that no book or no TV, no matter how big it is, could ever let you understand how massive our people thought, how huge our people thought. The pyramid on every side, 755 feet. They have some extension there on some of them because they don't want, because the way they built the pyramids, they built it so that there was play. Because if it was exactly 755, any type of earth experience could bring them down. So they had a little play in it so that it could rock back and forth, okay? That's the way California learned how to do their earthquake city, okay? Now, if we say 10 feet basically is a story, if you were to lay down pyramids from side, it would be the width of a 75-story building on either side. Think of a 75-story building and then lay it on its side. That's only walking one side of the pyramid.
Whoa.
Then another 75-story, another 75-story, another 2.3 million stones. Everyone weighing somewhere between 2 and 13 tons. A ton, 2,000 pounds. Anywhere from 4,000 pounds to 26,000 pounds. No mortar. Nothing is sticking them bricks together. They're so smooth. See, no matter what they tell you about what cut those stones, don't believe that. That's impossible. In fact, if what they said cut the tools, they're more intelligent than if they had laser technology. So no matter how you look at it, if you want to look at the so-called idea of heating the stone and then freezing the stone and then cracking the stone, if they could make those stones so smooth, because when we went into where the King's Chamber is, so-called King's Chamber, because we know it's not King's and Queen's Chamber, that's just what Europeans do when something is big and something small. The big one is the men and the little one is the women. Just like you got the 3 Kings Pyramid and they got the Queen's Small Pyramid. Had nothing to do with kings and queens, it's all lines of sight. So that's a whole other story. So smooth that if these 2 stones, you know how you have a table that's real smooth on top and you put face to face on, you just can't lift it because there's no space between, you gotta slide it off. Yeah. That's how smooth those stones are. Smooth. Like that. No mortar. They just knew how to, through engineering, just put those stones together. When you do the math of it, and I teach the math of this, when you take half the perimeter of Khufu's pyramid and divide it by the height is 481.4 feet. But I rounded off, 481. If you took half the perimeter of Khufu's pyramid and divided by the height of the pyramid, is equal to 3.14. So they knew, not only did they know pi, they knew how to build using pi. But let's stop for a moment. Now let's take this to the next level. Because when I learned pi, I learned it through the circle. Okay. But now we're dealing with a square. So they had rounded the square and squared the circle 3000 BC. That philosophically in mathematics is a quantum leap into another understanding of the mathematical principles of the earth. 5,000 years. They understood this. People that look like you and me did this. And we're supposed to be illiterate. We're supposed to not know math. This is what our ancestors did. Another story as it relates to the pyramids. The first stone step pyramid was built by Imhotep, Prince of Peace. He built a step pyramid. Okay. Step pyramid came from mastaba. A mastaba is where we get the mausoleum from. It's like this. It's an Arabic word. It means bench. But it's a big house like that. Okay? Like rectangular. And what Imhotep did in his mathematics is that he said, now, okay, I'm going to take another mastaba, make it smaller, but the run to rise ratio of the sides of this step pyramid, if A is proportional to the A of the smaller period. And if B, which is the run to rise, the rise is B, the run is A, is proportionate to the upper mastaba. He did that 6 times. A to B, A to B, A to B. He said if I should square it, the A to B, A squared plus B squared will equal the side that I'm going to build, and that's what built the perfect pyramid, was side C. So he actually was the one, 1,000 years before Pythagoras was alive, created the A squared plus B squared equals C squared. Today in mathematics, we teach it by finding the slope. Y equals mx plus b. This is why we have to study. That's why I tell our people we got to study. Okay? We have to study math. Let me advise you strongly to go on the internet. Go to www.africancreationenergy.com. Everywhere I go, I tell folk to do that. There are 3 books that African Creation Energy have on sale. I don't know who it is. I have a feeling I know who it is, but I don't know who it is because they go by the name African Creation Energy. They have 3 books, one on math, one on science, one on technology. Our children need to understand science, math, and technology from that perspective. I wish I knew when I was young what the physical sciences really were. They are so exact and so powerful. We need to know. And for anyone in here who will say, oh, I never got math, I didn't like math, I was bad in math. No, your teacher didn't know how to teach you. It's a very straightforward process. In fact, within the next couple of minutes, I'm going to say a couple of things that probably will help you understand, because what's the first thing that you learn in kindergarten? Now, mind you, brothers and sisters, I have not gotten off the topic mountains. I don't want anybody to think that I'm that random. Yes, my sister, please. The website is www.africancreationenergy. One word, africancreationenergy.com. I got those books blew my mind. Those are some powerful books. I got them a couple of months ago. Look, I'm where I am right now. I think I know something. The one thing exciting about all of this is that the more I learn, how much more I got to learn. That to me is exciting. That's the passion of an educator. An educator is a perpetual student.
Yes.
That just wants to teach whatever he or she is learning. That's what the passion of educator. Like the brother said, Brother King Simon said, you know, I mean, some people call it retirement. After 31 years, 3 months and 15 days, well, yeah, I count the days, because they pay me for them days. 15 days is 3/4 of a month. 3 months is 1/4 of a year. They pay you for every day you teach. So I count them days. 31 years, 3 months, 15 days. I did not retire from education. I graduated. It's called a commencement. Have you ever wondered why they always call graduation commencement?
Just beginning your life.
Just beginning. The reason why you studied was to begin to study again. That's what I did when I graduated.
Pomp and circumstance.
In July, yeah, that's it. That's so. March to it and everything. They said, do you want a retirement party? I said, no, retirement party is a funeral. So that's when they put me. That's it. They put dirt on me, put me 6 feet under so the jackals don't get my body. That is retirement. That retirement is spelled R-I-P. And we have to think like this as a people. I don't care what you are. Sanitation worker, bus driver, secretary, accountant, doctor, lawyer. I don't care what you are. Life is school. Pre-womb, post-womb. And we got to feel this. But we have to believe this. And we have to teach our children this.
Yes.
My children will tell you, I was their teacher. I'm only sending you to school to learn how to socialize. I'm your teacher. And every week they had assignments for me to do. And of the many things that they will tell you about some of the things that we had as, I don't even want to call it a requirement in my house. It was a standard of living. And when you get to that concept where this is a standard of living, the expectations never have to be expressed. They're just understood it's going to go down like that. That's how Daddy rolled. Okay, but in my house when I was growing up, my mother never once asked me, did I do my homework? My mother asked me if I did my homework was like asking me, did I eat lunch? She never even assumed I didn't do my homework. So that was a question never had to be asked in my house. It was just understood. And I never did not do my homework. Just like I ate lunch every day. These were standards that were based in Africa. These are African standards. So when they start talking about standards, I say, whose standards? Because your standards are lower than mine. Because my standards for my children were higher than what was expected in school. They had to read a book. They had to do a book.
Those are standards for baby goats.
Say again?
Those are standards for baby goats.
Kids, yes. 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 These are the kinds of things, I mean, when we talk about an African-centered approach, this is what I'm talking about. You know, there's no, like, special, see, when, I think sometimes when I'm questioned about a lot of this, it's like something new is going to appear. It's nothing new, it's just rearranging what's already in front of us. This is something that's a standard. When you first go into a classroom, or if you are taught at home, what is the first thing, so-called math, what's the first thing that you learn? Well, no, before addition. Brother, I'm going to be moving around. So,
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
before you learn how to count, what are you counting?
Numbers.
The numbers are going to
Numbers. You learn numbers. Okay. 0, 1, 2, 3. Okay. And then what do? Addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. Okay. The manipulation of the numbers that you've learned. Now what you do is when you go on to the 3rd grade, 4th grade, you start to manipulate and put those numbers that you've added and subtracted into varying ways. So you learn the commutative property, the distributive property, the associative property. Okay. All of this area is called number sense, by the way. Sense of numbers. You learn maybe a little percentile, averages. You go through that process. Get into the 6th grade, you learn what we call PEMDAS. Please excuse my dear aunt self. Parentheses, exponents, okay, multiplication, division, addition, subtraction. You then start to move up into what might be considered pre-algebra. Now, understand what algebra is. Algebra was brought into Europe by Africans. Algebra. That is the laws of Ma'at. Balance. That's why you have a lot of equations. The equal sign represents the scale of Ma'at.
Are they still teaching Roman numerals?
No, Roman numerals are not taught. Yeah, see, no, we learned that. The only place you got that is in the movies inside the building. And the Romans just never got it because they took the alphabet and tried to make them numbers. They said, no, that's just not going to work. Different ciphers altogether.
They would force us to get it.
Yes, yeah. And also they taught this other Korean way of counting with the hands. Word they had for it. What was interesting, but it really didn't catch on because it took the African mind to another area that, well, it took the Western mind to another area that they were very uncomfortable in. So you're dealing with equations. Well, what are you dealing with equations? Now you have these numbers. And what they do now is that they make you seek the unknown.
Yes.
So instead of learning, okay, you learn 2, you learn 1. Then you learn 2 plus 1 equals 3. Algebra now is going to replace one of those numbers or numerals for an X, an unknown. Remember Malcolm with the unknown? So now you're going to have 2 plus X equals 3. And you're going to have to solve for X. Bring 2 around and remember the law of opposites. The law of negation is when you cross over that equation line, you do the opposite operation. So then you have X you have a minus 2, 2 plus x equals 3 minus 2. Come down next level, because remember you're ascending in your levels. You have x equals 1. Okay, because 3 take away 2 is 1. Okay, that's now you're going into another philosophy. Now you're dealing with the unknown. And then you go through quadratic equations and you go through all sorts of, but you're searching the unknown using the known. Think of it as philosophy. Think of it as your mind. Because you know, Harriet Tubman did this on the plantation. She just didn't call it algebra. She called it the Underground Railroad. She did the same exact thing, but she did it in a different way. When you seek the unknown and you search the unknown, you find that as above, so below. So what you begin to do is you begin to search to measure the earth in order to now begin to develop a technology that allows you to utilize the math that you learned. So what do you learn after algebra? Geometry. Geo is earth, metry is measurement, the measurement of the earth. That is what the pyramids are. That is what the Tinus are. That's what the temples are. That's what the structures are. Okay? In the study of the earth, you find out, as Lester Loving will tell you, that there is one particular shape that dominates all the other shapes in the cosmic universe. And that is what? The triangle. So now what you do is you go on a quest to measure the triangle, which is trigonometry. Trigonometry. Okay, makes sense? It's straight up. Our children need to understand this. There's a purpose behind this. I wish I knew this when I was growing up. I just wish. It would have made so much better sense to me going from one step to another. It would never have been, couldn't handle it. It was too hard. Because if they can handle it and they don't know it, you know what we could do with it. And then after that, you have a fundamental cosmic understanding of numerology, and then you start all forms of calculations, and that becomes calculus. That's what we're doing in our classrooms, but we don't know the connection. Same thing with reading. We don't know listening, speaking, reading, writing. Number sense, algebra, geometry, trigonometry, calculus. It's a natural progression. The same letters, the same siphons that you use, the same way you decode to read, you decode for math. Once you learn the formulas, everything else, they can give you any number they want to. Once you understand the formula, the theorems, you just place those, plug it in. It's not difficult. They made it difficult because they're afraid of what's going to happen when we figure this out. It's happening as we speak because we're here. We figured it out. And our ancestors, no matter what they may have destroyed, left enough just for us to be able to figure out. And then they demanded of us, we ain't telling you the whole story. You finish it. See, the pyramids, we ain't going to do no more pyramids. Pyramids were done well. We don't need to redo pyramids. But what we need to do is to take that technological brilliance, apply it to 2011, and take it on take that show on the road. We don't need pyramids anymore. We have so many other things that we have developed. Even Galileo said he improved the telescope. He improved it, which means it existed before him. He didn't invent it. He improved it. But he didn't improve it. It was improved during his time by Africans who taught him about it. Because he sat at the feet of Moors. Da Vinci sat at the feet of Moors. Mozart's teacher was a black man named Suleiman. Goethe, the greatest poet of Europe, was a black man. The greatest violinist was Chevalier St. George. And while Chevalier was the greatest fencer in Europe, he was the greatest violinist in Europe. And he was a contemporary of a younger brother that he took underneath his wing from Haiti, and his name was Alexander Dumas.
Three Musketeers.
Writer of the Three Musketeers. But his father, Thomas Alexander Dumas, was the general that opened up Egypt for Napoleon. And the story is that Dumas, Thomas Dumas, from Haiti, his mother's name was Marie Dumas, was loved by the French people. Brought back. And they said the first person, and this is in J.A. Rogers' work, okay? Also, there's a series of magazines called Golden Legacy by a brother named, I think it's Fitzgerald, Bertrand Fitzgerald. And one of them deals with the three Dumas. Thomas Dumas was the first one. Born in Haiti, his mother was Haitian, she died. Father brought Thomas Dumas back to France, gave him great education. He remarried. Thomas Dumas was insulted that his father married again, so he broke away from his father and took his mother's name. That's why his name is Thomas Dumas. And he became a general in the French army, a great general. In fact, he was known to fight, to fence multiple people in one day. And in fact, there's a story of him who he fights 3 people in one day and wins. Thomas Dumas opens up Egypt. Napoleon sends him back, because Napoleon is the general in charge. He sends him back. But he knows that if Thomas Dumas gets back to France, the first person to get back is going to become the emperor of France. So he tells the enemy where Thomas Dumas is going to be going. They capture him, keep him for 4 years. That allows Napoleon to finish up his work in Egypt, and then he goes to France and he becomes the emperor. If Thomas Dumas had gotten back first, guess who the emperor of France would have been? See, this is our history, but we don't know this. Thomas Dumas gives birth to a young man. His name is Alexander Dumas. Two. Alexander Dumas. His name was Thomas Alexander Dumas. His son's name is Alexander Dumas. Alexander Dumas is the author of The Three Musketeers, The Man in the Iron Mask. Okay? He also wrote a very interesting book called Georges, which you should get a hold of. It talks about an interracial brother growing up in France during that time. And is believed to be the story of his father's friend, Chevalier St. George. Okay? Now, Three Musketeers just came out. Boy, they just keep rewriting and redoing this movie all the time. But how does the book open up and how does the movie open up? What happens? You have these 3 Musketeers that fight who? D'Artagnan. When Thomas Alexander Dumas wrote that story, he was dedicating the beginning of the 3 Musketeers to his father, who had that mythological story of him fighting 3 men in one day. Because remember, D'Artagnan fights 3 Musketeers at one time, and then he becomes the 4th Musketeer. Okay, and the Musketeers were the warriors of France, very much based on the fighters of Japan. The Musketeers in French are very much like the Japanese shoguns. Okay, same concept. And that comes out of the priesthood of ancient Kemet. The warriors, the Nubian warriors. Okay, the Moors are also very much into that. They are the ones that bring what we call, begins with a C, chivalry. Brings chivalry to France. Brings the Freemason society to France. And those Moors that bring chivalry to France, that's what the Knights Templar are based on. And that is what's going to bring forward all the other things that we see. In the Jewish faith, it's going to be masked in the Kabbalah. In the Christian faith, it's going to be masked in the Knights of Columbus. Because the Knights of Columbus is a Catholic Freemason society.
And Knights of Malta too.
Knights of Malta. Now that goes into the Mediterranean. This is all African story. This is also going to come to America, and that's who the Braves are. You know, we have the term the brave. Well, that's who the Braves are amongst indigenous people. This story, these Africans that are going to be moving into this part of the world, there are waves of, I just want to make sure I don't go over my time.
It's a 9.
9, okay, it's 8:28, because I think we need questions and answers and things like that. And also, I have some things, I brought some DVDs and some materials. But,
If it goes to 9, then you can do the question and answer from 9 to.
okay, so we have a comfortable half hour left. Okay. These mounds are going to be what's based on the African pyramids. It's going to be the story that's going to come to us through, we have evidence. There is a book called Indian Givers, written by Jack Weatherford. Chapter 2 is called Pyramids Along the Mississippi. You know, there are over 150 mounds along the Mississippi River. There is a major mound that is in the Y of the Mississippi River. Today it's called Collinsville, Illinois. The ancient indigenous people were known as the Cahokia people. They're located in the Y. What's important about the Mississippi River is that the Mississippi, see, when we study indigenous culture, we study indigenous culture from a European perspective. Mm-hmm. We start with the 13 colonies, and then we got this westward whole thing. So we come in contact with indigenous people as Europeans came in contact with indigenous people. Lewis and Clark and the exploration of the West and all that sort of stuff. But to truly understand indigenous history, you have to go to the Mississippi River, because the Mississippi River was to indigenous population what the Nile or the Happy River was in Africa. You can get to any part of this hemisphere on the Mississippi River. When it gets to Illinois, it branches off. The Mississippi River continues in one direction, the Ohio River continues in another. But from that, there are tributaries, there are rivers, there are streams, there are paths that can take you right up into Alaska. If you're traveling south, you can go down into Louisiana. You can now start to move along the Gulf of Mexico, down through Central America, into South America, down all the way to Tierra del Fuego in South America. In this book, Indian Givers, by Jack Weatherford, he talks about evidence that Cahokia, to the indigenous population, was like Washington, D.C. It was the capital of indigenous Americans. It is where the Iroquois, the Algonquin, the Muskegon, the Siouan peoples, the peoples of the Caribbean, the peoples of Central and South America all met. And they based themselves after, and there were many of them, but in northern New York, southern Canada, there's a group of indigenous people who collectively are known as the Haudenosaunee, the French misnomer than the Iroquois. And they have a confederation. They have a law, great law of peace, that they call Gaia Nerekawa. K-A-I-A-N-E-R-E-K-O-W-A. K-A-I-A-N-E-R-E-K-O-W-A. That means the great law of peace. There was a man, they called him the Dreamer, from the Mohawk people. The 5 nations, the Mohawk, Seneca, the Oneida, the Onondaga, and the Iroquois were the collective. Oneida, Onondaga, Seneca, Mohawk, and Cayuga. 5 nations. Later the Tuscarora of Virginia would join. But right now we're talking about these 5 nations in northern New York. 1000 ACE. A man from the Mohawk Nation comes down and observes these 5 nations fighting amongst themselves. Bloodletting, I mean really just demolishing the nations. And he says to them, one day there's going to be a larger force that's going to come and you're going to have to be united. And what he did was that he took an arrow and he broke it. And then he took 5 arrows and he showed how much more difficult it was to break 5 arrows than 1. He said, that's like us. If we join together, we will survive and be able to meet. Now he's telling them something that will not come true for 500 years. He's saying there's someone that's going to come among you that is going to threaten your survival. You must stop fighting. You know, I use this when I visit Bloods and Crips and Latin Kings and Paloma. I go and I tell this story, you know, and I bring the books and I do a reading thing with them too, you know. And I explain to them and help them understand, you know, that this is how these nations who were warring with each other were able to come together. And what he did was that the Onondaga territory is the biggest territory. It's the largest nation of the 5. And it's located in the middle. You got the 2 on one side, 2 on the other. And what he did was that he brought them together on the Onondaga territory. And what he did is that he had a bush and he lifted the bush and he had them put their hatchets in there. You ever heard the term burying the hatchet? This is where it comes from. He had them buried. He said, now when I place this bush back over, we will war no more. And he placed the bush back over, and those 5 nations joined. And what he did is he developed a system of government that allowed every nation to have representatives that would meet on Onondaga territory every 2 years to talk about mutual concerns.
Confederacy.
It's eventually, it's going to become the Iroquois Confederacy. Okay. Now, they're going to... This is in New York. This is in northern New York, up there by where the Finger Lakes are, Plattsburgh, Buffalo, going into Canada, Toronto. Yeah, okay? All up in that area. And they are going to elect these people amongst their people, and they will be able to have the amount of what they call sachems, S-A-C-H-E-M-S. By the way, the other book by Jack Weatherford is called Indian Givers. Chapter 6 is what I'm drawing some of this from. I also have the Kayanetic Hour in my home. I have this law that was drawn up. And what happened, the sachems, the Onondaga had more sachems than anybody. Than the Mohawk had, Seneca had, Cayuga had, but they all would come and they would voice on Onondaga territory, Onondaga lands, the concerns of each community, and they would pool their resources to help all of them survive. Now here's what they did next. Out of this pool of sachems, every nation could pick one that would sit on what was called the Grand Council, or the Great Council, the Great Council of Elders. And no matter how big or small the nation was, they could only have one. Okay? This was Kayanetic. This was the Confederacy. It was Confederation. That while every one of them was sovereign and independent, at the same time, they worked as a union together. Let's jump 1744. When the colonists want a place in Parliament, remember, they were not looking for independence. They were looking to have, remember the first cry was taxation without representation is tyranny. They weren't looking for independence. Long before Henry Clay said, give me liberty or give me death, they were saying taxation without representation. So the George Washingtons and Thomas Jefferson and them said, well, you know, I mean, you all there in Parliament are making decisions for us. We should have a place in Parliament. And the British said, look, we got rid of your criminals. What do you think we want you back here for? You do what we say. We're not talking to you. In fact, you know, so I don't want to talk to you no more. And so what happened is that in Boston, there was a group of folk gathered together, and it was on the docks, and there were the law, like, you know, they had all sorts of different acts. The Stamp Act, the Sugar Act, okay, that taxed the colonists, right? And they got all upset and whatnot, and one day they had a situation on the docks, and there were 9 British military, and there was a captain. And they cornered these British people, these Americans in Boston, and started a little something going on the docks. Somebody picked up a stick and started beating one of the British guys, right? They shot him. That was a black man named Christmas Adams. Now that was the Boston Massacre. A couple of years later, this is 1770, a couple of years later, you're going to have an incident that the British were scared now, because they said, you know, these colonists are buck wild crazy and they're starting a lot of stuff. So what we're going to do, we're going to ease up on those taxes. But we're just going to keep one.
Just that one.
We're going to keep one because the British East India Company has a monopoly on tea. And we need to save them because they're losing money. So we're going to keep that where we can make money on the tea. But the colonists said, well, we make tea too. So the British said, you can only buy tea from us. You can't buy tea from each other. They said, well, you know, what kind of nonsense is this? No, that's not going to happen. So a group of Europeans painted their faces red, dressed in Native American garb, and went on 4 ships in the harbor and started throwing tea off. And that became the Tea Party. That action would lead to the American Revolution. So when folk are talking about the American Revolution, it was a black man that started it by the name of Crispus Attucks.
To add to that story, esoteric aspect, I don't know if maybe you've heard it. They really said that what they were looking for in the crates of tea was the charter they gave the first black Masonic Lodge charter, the Prince Hall. And colonists said, King George at the time, he said, oh, y'all want to do this? It was like sacrilege to start a lodge of black people, right? So the colonists, under the guise, they wanted to get that charter because they had the legitimacy of the king. He said, well, how could you let a black people who were, some were freed, some were enslaved, to start their own lodge? So I'm just saying it was purported that that's what they really was looking for, to get that first charter. Some people say it's the John Belmore Charter or the Prince Hall Charter. But either way, that was a revolutionary thing at that time to have black people start their own Masonic lodge.
And to continue, there was, Crispus Attucks was not the only black man in that group. There were other black people in that group also. And what would lead to that was also the breakdown of what would eventually make the British offer Africans who fought in the war their freedom. Because they began to see, look, black folk, going back to Occupy Wall Street, they can't do nothing without us. You know, you gotta understand this.
Right.
You really have to understand this, you see, because a lot of times we have been so downplayed, we downplay ourselves and don't understand how important we are. And so we think that when they stretch their arm out to us, they're being kind. No, they need us. But we don't, sometimes we don't see it that way because we don't see how great we really are. We really don't. And sometimes in our analysis, there is a paralysis, as Dr. Leonard Jeffrey says, there's a paralysis in the analysis. What's going to happen is that the British and the Americans are going to have a meeting, and there's going to be a Native American by the name of Conestoga that's going to be at this meeting. And he's part of the Haudenosaunee. And he's going to tell these 13 colonies, he said, look, we make a treaty with the New Jersey, people in New Jersey, and the people in New York don't honor it. But it's supposed to be universal amongst us as a nation. And then we do something with Delaware, and Maryland don't recognize it. You all got to do something. They say, well, what can we do? We're 13 sovereign states that we don't answer to each other. He said, well, you need to take a lesson from what we did. He said, well, what did you do? And they explained to them what they did. This is before the Revolutionary War. This is 1744. This is right around the time of the problems that they're going to have. But this Crispus Attucks and all this other stuff is 1770, 1774. Now I'm taking you back to 1744, when the Americans and the British have this meeting, and Conestoga explains to them what they can do, because
To unite?
you can unite, still remain sovereign. You still can be 13 sovereign states. This is why states' rights is so important. This is why when you hear about the Medicaid and the Obamacare and how states are going to vote whether they want it or not, because they're trying to give states the right to decide. States' rights is very important. This is the civil rights movement was based on states' rights. Okay? That the federal government stay out of my business. You don't tell me what to do. Until there's a natural disaster, then we need money.
Then we need help.
Yeah, Christy wants help now. Okay, before he says, mind your business. Now he say, we had a snowstorm. Give us some money. Now we need you. That's a whole other side.
That money's in Israel.
That's a whole nother story. So you have Conestoga tell this story. They say, okay, it's interesting, but at this time they're not really going to get too deep into it, so they just keep on going until the American Revolution takes place. And they're going to meet in Albany. Ben Franklin, George Washington. This is documented, by the way. This isn't something coming out of just... This is documented. This is in Ben Franklin's autobiography. Right. So this is spoken about. He says in Albany, he said, because they're in the meeting in Albany, they say, but we didn't ask for independence. We just wanted a place in power. We didn't want Daddy to kick us out the house. We just wanted a place at the table. Now Daddy done kicked us out the house, and now we're in trouble because what are we going to do? Ben Franklin says, but remember Conestoga, remember what the Native Americans told us about uniting the 13 colonies? Let's invite them back. So they invite, not Conestoga, but they invite another Native American back. And they take very good notes. That becomes the Bill of Rights. Wow. Okay, now, they're going to listen, and he said, but we want you to come down now to Philadelphia, because this is where all 13 are going to meet. So they go down to Philadelphia, and this is where all, they say, you know, that's a good idea. I'm glad we thought about that. That becomes the Constitution of the United States. Is the Haudenosaunee Nericao. Who are the constituents in the government today? The House of Representatives. Who's the Great Council? The Senate. They give it back to the Native Americans for their little perusal to look. And the Native Americans say, well, what is this? They say, well, this is our document of freedom, our confederation. This is our confederation. They say, but there's two things wrong with this. And until you fix those two, you will always be making corrections on this document. What do you think the first one was?
Slavery one.
That was number 2. What was number 1? The first thing the Native Americans said, you ain't going nowhere. Without what? Come on, sisters. With who?
Women.
Women. They say, where you going without the womb? This will never work with women, not because, remember, Native Americans are matrilineal. There's a total equality under the Great Spirit between men and women. And they're saying this will never work. You will always be making corrections to this document. And what are the corrections to the document? Amendments. Every one of those amendments is attempting to correct one of the mistakes in the original Bill of Rights. They still haven't gotten it. No, they haven't. Because the fact that you have to have amendments means that the document is wrong. It's flawed. It's a flawed document. And the amendments will never correct. You guess what? Take it out and write it again. It's the only way it'll work.
Put it in the women.
And this way everybody sits at the table and has a say. It's the only way it's going to work. America is doomed. And that's what the Native Americans told them. You're doomed. You will never, ever survive the way you got this. And guess what? Your fathers and mothers in Europe, they're going down too. And they're going down in order. What was the first country to get in trouble economically in Europe?
Greece.
What was the second country?
Greco-Roman.
Roman, Italy. And what was the third?
Next is Spain and Portugal.
Spain. No, don't believe me. Go back and look what happened over the summer. Look what's happening now. See, they patched it up. They gave cough medicine when they had pneumonia. They put a Band-Aid when they need stitches.
Yes.
Yes.
How long was that going to last?
Yes, because it happened last year. Greek went down first. Italy went down. Spain went down. Okay? And then what they tried to do is they tried to help.
Yeah.
Today, Greece went down again, and so did the stock exchange. Went down. The same thing that the Native Americans told them is exactly what's happening. You're going down in order. What was the first country to invade Africa? It was Greece. Well, Persia really, but Iran ain't too much in it right now. Greece, and then Italy, and then the Moors in Spain.
Of course.
That's why I say we need to mind our business. This is nature acting. This ain't us. Nature already told us. God told me when I was talking to him, what we going to do? He said, first of all, don't even get involved. He said, this on me. He said, this on me. Okay? He said, I'll take it. And he said, guess what? Your mind doesn't have the imagination that I'm going to concoct to pay them back for what they did. So just sit, chill out, be still, and know that I am God. Be still. Chill out. And this is happening all around us. We're not even touching this. We've got nothing to do with this. Boss, we're not sick. You sick. And I truly hope that that wind is going to blow in the direction of the house.
And they're using a red, black, and green flag to lynch Africans. You got these pale Arabs are lynching, they're called sub-Saharan Africans. I said, excuse me. He always black before y'all got here. But you see how they're using the power of the red, black, and green because it's very powerful. That's what Garvey gave us that. And so when people ask me, they say, why? Oh, I don't see the red, black, and green. Ain't nobody be wearing no red, black, and green. They read that, oh, them all the colors. But now, there's the power of that. Now, Wicked Witch of the West, Hillary, she went there the day before they said, oh, now we found Gaddafi. She just happened to go there. You see, all of these things have a connection. But that by you messing with that red, black, and green, you in a lot of trouble. I'm going to be quiet.
Well, you know, my brother Dawud, it's all around us. And the directions of, and you know, I'm not very much into hocus pocus and mumbo jumbo, but I do follow a sequential scientific method of observing what you throw out comes back. That's nature. That has nothing to do with hocus pocus, mumbo jumbo. I'm not into that, and I try to stay away from that when I talk to our people, because you see, one of our greatest blessings is one of our greatest curses, because the deeper you are sometimes in religion, the deeper you are into superstition.
Yes.
And that becomes a very difficult problem for us. We get very superstitious with us. And we tend to think sometimes that, well, it's going to happen. We don't have to do it because God's going to do it.
No.
Well, God, yeah, in a sense, I can go with that, but in a sense, you better get busy. Okay, don't sit back and wait for all four. Jesus saves those who save themselves. We are the enactment of this spirituality. So what I'm trying to get us to understand is that, well, what my perception of what we should be about at this point in our history is studying and learning ourselves.
Yes.
Collect the legacy that was snatched from us. Dr. Diop talks about in civilizational barbarism. There's a short chapter called Why Cultural Identity, and he says when a people want to oppress a people, the three things they will take from the oppressed people is their history, their language, and their psychological factor. Their psychological factor are their celebrations, they are their rituals, they are the people who are important in their lives, and they will replace them with what they have.
That's it.
Okay, so what we have to do, regain our history.
Yes.
ASCAC concept of rescue, research, return. Okay, and as it relates to language, I do realize there are many African languages. To be practical, as an African people, we must make Medunete or hieroglyphs classical African language. Just like Greek is the classical language of the Western world, Medunete must become our classical African language that we revert back to. But that's not the language we're going to speak. The language that we should use as a practical language. If we go to Holland, our brothers and sisters speak Dutch, we speak English. We should be able to speak Kiswahili. We go to Brazil, they speak Portuguese, we speak English, we should be able to speak Kiswahili to each other. Kiswahili is the largest African language. I understand people say that there's a lot of Arabic words. Keep in mind, Arabic is an African language, for one thing. But also keep in mind, the base of Kiswahili is, I don't like to use this word, but they use it, the Bantu, which is that Central African language that's at the heart and soul of most African language throughout the entire continent. The cultural identity.
That's the root word for Bantustan?
Yeah, basically. And I try to stay away from Bantu because I don't really even understand what that means, but it means something as it relates to an indigenous African people in the core of Africa. So I use that only to make that reference, but not that I would use it as a word. But Kiswahili is the 7th largest language spoken in the world, period. It's spoken in Kenya, it's spoken in Congo, spoken in Tanzania. It's the large. So when we are trying to find a language, it's not that I'm saying don't study Twi, I'm not saying don't study Akan, Yoruba, Iwe, whatever. You can study them all. But a common language that Kwanzaa is in the language Kiswahili. Most of the things that we grew up learning came in Kiswahili. So let's stick with a practical language that's already out there being used and being practiced. Let's be practical about this. Not that we don't study the others, but let's be practical. So to regain our language, be able to speak to each other with an African mind, I say Medunete, classical African language that we study the pictographs and understand its grammar and syntax. But the language that we will speak it should be Kiswahili. Now we're going to regain our language. And then our rituals. For us to celebrate George Washington, to live in Thomas Jefferson houses. That goes against the psychological factor. How can I honor a man that did me no good, meant me no good? The so-called founding fathers. How could I have any form of a balance in my mind if I'm honoring people who meant me no good? So we have to return back to the rituals and the ceremonies, and in many ways I go back to the plantation. And I live a plantation life. And on a plantation, we didn't have a lot of those rituals and ceremonies. But we certainly had a way of living that was very African.
Truly.
And so I say that for those that enjoy ritual, for those that enjoy ceremony, go ahead, do your thing. But for those that may not be in the ceremony, are not into ritual, return back to honoring that which honors you.
That's it.
Get back your psychological factor. And stop thinking that people are inviting you because they love you. Realize they're inviting you because they need to exploit you.
Yes.
Understand the difference between that.
Yes.
Also understand the difference between a friend, an enemy, and an ally.
And a friend.
Well, a friend is someone that's going to be lifelong. An enemy is someone that's lifelong. An ally is someone that's your friend for as long as the...
Purposes come.
Exactly. Because once it's over, that so-called ally can become a greater enemy than the enemy that you jointly fought.
Yes.
And the evidence of that is after World War II. We were friends with Russia and China, enemies with Germany and Japan. After the war, we were friends with Germany and Japan, and Russia and China became our enemy. Okay? And that showed you. Okay, Allied was only up until 1945, and now we're back to real deal. Just to tell you what I brought with me. Africans in early America. I have brought with me packets of this. But this basically is a book list. This is a college course I taught on the African presence in early America. Many times we have book lists that we read books. But a college course is not meant to be a book list. A college course is meant to break down a theme over a period of, in this case, there are 15 lessons. You read chapter by chapter. You read theme by theme. You don't read they came before Columbus all at one time. What you do is you break it down. And you begin to look at the entire process, so by the time you get to lesson 15, you have a clear understanding. So you may read 2 chapters in They Came Before Columbus, a chapter in African Presence in Early America, which I see there, and you might read something in Dawn Voyager. There are also resource books like Frank Joseph's book, The Lost Treasure of King Juba, Jarasboy's book. R.A. Jarasboy has a series of books, Ancient Egyptians in Middle and South America, Ancient Egyptian and Chinese in America, and Ramses III, father of ancient America. Because there's evidence of the 19th dynasty on the Mississippi River. There's evidence of the coca leaf in Ramses II's stomach. So it's obvious that Africans were here, and indigenous people went to Africa. That's another thing that we don't discuss. We keep talking about Africans coming to America, but there was indigenous that went to Africa. And they had years of trade, years of relationships, that this was not a new thing. See, we got this 1492 thing going on. Right. Not realizing there was an ancient world in existence with success hundreds, if not thousands of years before European came out the case.
So it says the known world.
Yes.
That's the world that he knew.
Yes.
But everybody else, there was a world way beyond.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you say the known world.
Yeah. I also, because of my experience, I developed a lesson plan series around the science of travel, the 25th dynasty. I have a lesson on the 25th dynasty. I have a lesson on the first Americans, because there were 4 migrations to America, not 1. And the first one was the Twa people, the short-statured people, Africans. African people, people of the planet, period, for thousands and thousands of years. The Twa were the only people on the planet. Out of that Twa people came a taller people that here is called Clovis Folsom. Taller African people found in Clovis and Folsom, New Mexico. Evidence of their
arrows and everything.
Exactly, Clovis Folsom. These are African people, taller than the Twa. The third migration was the Algonquin. The Algonquin was a lighter brown, yellowish, reddish complexion people that came over. The final and fourth is what everybody focuses on, and that's the Inuit, or what they call the Eskimo. Out of those 4 people came 1 people, by matter of degree, that people from Alaska to Tierra del Fuego, that when Europeans came here, there was such a stark difference in the complexion. This is how you know what the Native Americans look like. See, this Kevin Costner 500 Nations thing. No. They were so different in complexion, they purposely called them red. And when the Native American looked at the European, there was such a difference in complexion, they said, that's a pale face. So it's obvious that there was a stark difference in complexion in these 2 people. And we're talking about the ones that were on the East Coast. So there was a stark difference. Now, once people start blending and melding, then you have the other complexions that might lighten up the complexion. But the original indigenous people, the red man, looked like that face on the Cincinnati Reds cap.
Yeah.
With that big smile.
Yes.
Looked like Sambo, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Native American. And then I have a lesson plan on the OLMECS civilization, the city of Teotihuacan, the pyramid of the sun and the moon, and the pyramid of Palenque. Now, the way I set this up was for our children. This is a children's, for you to study. This gives you the books and the basic adult information, but this is set up as lesson plans of how you can teach this to children, or even the community. This is set up like this. And you can make copies of the worksheets that I have put in here, and the pictures, and here on the back I have a bibliography for your extended information. Okay. Last April there was a movie came out, a documentary called Hidden Colors. And there was a group of us that was involved in scholars like Francis Cresswell, Dr. Phil Valentine, who will be here soon, Umar Johnson, who will be here, Sabir Bey, myself, and it was put together by Tariq Bey, a brother from California. And when I premiered, when the movie premiered in New York, Tariq had put it on World Star Hip Hop, okay, and a lot of young people saw it, right? And if you all been on World Star Hip Hop, you know what I'm talking about. They saw this, okay, and they thought it was going to be hip-hopish, so they came out to the premiere. They said, wow, this is a movie documentary. Thought they were going to see Lil Wayne and Drake and Nicki Minaj. It's okay, I love them. But, lo and behold, they got Hidden Colors. And I went outside the movie house to greet them, thank them for coming, and just be there to answer any questions they have. And the brothers came out, young people came out, they said, man, that movie just blew my mind. I thought I was going to see something on hip hop, man. I didn't know I was going to talk about Africans in Asia, I never. And right there I realized that we had to put together some type of study guide. Now, with respect to the copyright of Hidden Colors, I'm not calling it Hidden Colors. I'm calling this study guide, 24 pages. I'm calling it Humanity is Born in Africa, Africans Travel the World, study. This is set up, Africans in Asia, the Moors, all of the things that were in Hidden Colors. Basically, I've developed a study guide so that our community can take this information. There are lists of books to read, and just like I did the Africans in America piece, in fact, that's part of this, is the books to read and how to break it up to read it, because one of the challenges we have is that we're getting caught up in a lot of things that create problems for us. Because I'm not into book clubs, I'm into conceptual clubs. We need to study concepts, not books. We have to break books up into pieces and apply them into themes to study. That's how this study guide is put together. And so I brought this with me also. I also have DVDs. DVDs are $10. The study guides are $5. Okay, because I'm trying to make a living, not a killer.
Just a question, within your study guide, could you speak a little about the Esther Island and where does that fit in with your brilliant presentation to the night?
The Easter Islands, or the Esther Islands, basically are looking towards Asia. They're depicting concepts of a presence of a people that developed the same type of philosophy within technology what you're going to see about African peoples as they travel across the globe is they're going to leave a mark. We have to study that mark, and that is a way of thinking. It is deeply embedded in hip hop. I understand some of us have problems with it, but now where do I go? And I think we let our children down.
Yes, we do.
By not doing what's there. Now, part of it also is something that's deep within inside all of us. We all have to correct ourselves. Children got a responsibility in this also, so I'm not just trying to say it's us. I'm just saying we all have to come together. Let us stop judging each other and our children. Let's stop fighting amongst ourselves. Because everywhere I study our history, I have never seen anybody come outside of another culture into our culture and defeat us person to person. I have seen us fighting amongst ourselves, and they take advantage of that divide and conquer. Everywhere. From ancient Kemet, in the coming of the first intermediate period, the second intermediate period, the Moors, because what brought the Moors down in Granada is that Bo Abdil was infighting with his father-in-law and his uncle. And that's what allowed Castile and Aragon to come in on him. Had there been a united Africa, not to mention, of course, that the Almohade were in Africa going into Spain and fighting the Africans there too. It was black on black crime. And because of that, other people were able to come in and defeat us. When we stop fighting ourselves, it's going to change the entire structure of much of what we're experiencing. When we become issue-oriented instead of personality-oriented, when we start getting into organizations and stop talking about, oh, he think he all that, or who she thinks she is, and we start realizing that it's the issue for our people that we're going to be focused on. Because quite frankly, I work with people that can't stand me. And I didn't particularly care for the people, that's the only thing. But I respected the issue that we both were trying to overcome. And many times, although we may never become best friends after, we did learn to respect each other, that we were able to work together despite our personal differences and still get the job done. And to this day, I still know people that still don't necessarily care for me. Man, I don't particularly care for them, but I respect them. I take my own personal feelings out, look at them as an issue, and the issue is they're dynamic, they're powerful, they work hard, and they got my back. But they don't like me. But that's all right.
That's okay.
Because I don't like you. But that's all right, because we don't have to like each other. We can disagree without being disagreeable.
Yes.
We can have unity without being unified.
Yes.
So after the job done, you go your way, I go my way. It's cool, brother. I love you. I respect you. Bye-bye. And they do the same to me. That's cool. It's all right. So, as we wrap this up, we have questions and answers. Anything else that you might want to do? If you're interested and remember the vows. My brother, King Simon, I'll give it back to you to give us direction as to where we go from here.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Well, give him a round of applause again. One of the questions and answers, of course, people, Dr. Blair did an exclusive meditation right here.
How is he doing?
He's doing good. He's still in town. Matter of fact, he's in the Harlem at a bed and breakfast. You want his number? His card, his business card is right here. Is giving out his business. He's in town until next Monday. So if anybody wants any consultation from Dr. Blair, he's in town. He wanted to come down here, but he want to get rest because he's doing so much. It's people like them that keeps us going. People like Daoud who keeps us going. You hear him on YouTube, and I said pick him up on his radio show.
I hope I didn't dominate you.
No,
I was just joking.
Yeah, but you know something, man, this is our thing.
It's family.
I know.
It's family. It's a family
I'm
thing.
paying attention.
I want to thank Turtle Gang. They had a great documentary of Noble Drew Ali. He gave me this like a few months ago. I already watched it, so I stayed and watched it, but it was a great thing up in National Black Theater. And today, of course, if y'all can get out to any of the Zulu nations, it's like that brother.
Just so the brothers.
Yeah, those brothers are doing their thing. And you know, the late great Heavy D, who just passed on,
Yes.
was a Zulu.
And he used to come down with Arthur Forex back in the day, or Kid Dust back in the day. And Bam was telling me up there, he used to come down. And I met him twice, and he's always been a genuine brother to me, because I'm in the reggae world. He used to come to the reggae shows that I produced at Randall's Island, all these stations. You know, he used to come out. So, love and honor to that brother, and let's all give a big ashe to Heavy D. Ashe. He's now part of he's part of the ancestor.
He in a better place.
And even Joe Frazier, part of the ancestor, another person part of the ancestral realm. He did his job. You know, and there's a lot of great boxers out there that's mimicking Joe Frazier today. Dipping and moving and hitting and dipping and moving.
Copying that style.
Copying the style. Muhammad Ali style, all that. So we got to say love and honor to all of the ancestors. And I thank all of y'all coming. Y'all got any questions for Kaba? Raise your hands. Or you want to support the brother. He got the curriculum. He got the DVDs, some great DVDs. Believe me. I watched one with my son earlier today. Believe me, get some DVDs or ask any question you want. Raise your hands, give a question, whatever you want to do, all right? Show him some love again. Okay.